let's start off with a couple of words of where we are currently in the world. Let's start with this.
Every small business starts with a dream. But the journey from nothing to success can be hard. At iZettle, we want to make that road easier by empowering small businesses and helping them take on the fight against the giants. Because we believe that they also belong on the high street. We invited 6 of Britain's smallest businesses to open up their very own flagship store on Britain's greatest shopping street. We called it the 12-hour store. Over 6 days, we made 6 dreams come true. While together, we took on the big brands right in the heart of London. We're not just about helping small businesses take payments. We also stand by them as they grow. Because we know that big things start small.
So I think introducing this video kind of shows us where at least offline payments are heading. iZettle started 4 years ago in Stockholm. We're currently 180 employees across 9 markets, across 3 different continents. So 7 markets in Europe, we're in Brazil, we're in Mexico. And the interesting thing is that the payments landscape looks pretty much the same in all the markets where we're currently present. Effectively, what it means is that the number of cards in each and every market per capita is extremely high. The number of acceptance devices that can take on those payments are actually fairly low. So we come a pretty long way. We started off with an ambition 4 years ago to create a solution that makes payments, taking payments easy. So effectively, the vision back then was to allow for anyone, individuals or the smallest of merchants like your tennis instructor or the small cafe on the corner, to get a cheap device in a very fast and easy way, just by signing up online. It takes 5 minutes to get started. Install your device, anyone can do it, and the next day you have your money in your bank account. Today, we're in a slightly different position, as you can see from the first video, but also looking here. We've moved much more into being a player that are helping businesses to grow their business. Because, matter of fact, if you look at the businesses that we are addressing today, they are very, very small. We don't care about the H&Ms of the world. We don't care about the IKEAs. All these guys have great payment solutions from the incumbents, from the banks, with business models that actually suit their business. However, if you look around Europe, most of the companies in Europe are actually small businesses, micro merchants, between 1 to 3 employees. And these guys are really small. They have limited businesses, a limited volume, so they don't really fit in sort of the incumbent business model of payments. But the interesting thing, if you look at an aggregated level, they account for roughly 30% of the GDP in any given market around Europe, and more 50 to 70% of the GDP of some of the Latin and South American countries. So our ambition here, with the 20 million small businesses around Europe and 20 million people unemployed, our vision and mission is really how can we facilitate for these small businesses to, first of all, take payments, but then, second, make sense of the data. So how can we help them grow their business to the next level? And if you think about it, all these tools have really been available for online merchants for years. For the last decade, any online merchant, no matter the size, can really know everything about their customers. Where did they come from? How much did they spend? Do they return? Are they a super good customer, just a semi-good customer? Offline merchants, they don't have a clue. Prior to companies like iZettle, effectively the only thing that they knew was how many payments did they do per day and how much did they sell for. But there were no tools to actually communicate with the customer, or no tools to actually work with integrated accounting in an easy fashion. So all these things are things that we spend a lot of time on, really helping these guys to grow their business to the next level where they can employ a second person in their business. And if we're successful, the 20 million businesses and 20 million people unemployed in Europe, maybe there's an interesting match going forward. I think given the businesses that we're addressing, our core of what we do is really not about hardware. It's about the service, and it's about making the service extremely simple. Traditionally, payments is pretty complex. If you want a payment terminal from your bank, you need someone to come out to you and set it up and install it. It takes a couple of weeks to sign up, etc. Given that our target group is everything from the 70-year-old lady selling fabric at some event 4 times a year, things need to be very, very simple. So for us, design is really where everything starts. UI, UX, everything is very neatly put together and extremely important to make sure that we get our things right. And for that reason, all our designers are extremely involved in our product development. So the number of iterations that we do before releasing anything to our merchants is pretty rigorous. And we do everything from qualitative to quantitative studies. And we meet with the user groups, etc. But always the ambition that anyone should be able to get started taking their first payment within 5 minutes. So now, looking at the future of payments, where are we? I think we're in a pretty interesting position. I'd say the year of 2014 has been sort of fundamental for where we're heading next. As you can see, almost $507 billion have been processed in total by mobile payment transactions in 2014. So it's getting a bit fairly sizable in terms of payment volume. I think also what's interesting is that looking at next year, the estimation is that there will be roughly 2.5 billion smartphones in the world. And the reason why that is interesting is that, first of all, smartphones can serve as acceptance devices. So you can take payments with smartphones. But also looking at what Apple launched just a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden smartphones can also become more of a traditional card, because that is effectively what Apple Pay does and is. You can enter your existing card details into a phone, and you can use that phone in any of the traditional terminals that you find in any regular store or iZettle. So you can take your phone, use your American Express details or MasterCard details, pay in that device, and the sort of end user experience is pretty much the same as always. I think fundamentally that is the biggest disruption that Apple took to the market with Apple Pay. Using the installed base of smartphones, of cards, of the fact that we as consumers, we tend to like our cards. You like to show off your American Express or whatever type of fancy card that you have, and you like collecting mileage points and stuff like that. So that is pretty clever, not trying to reinvent anything. Over the next 3 years, there will be fairly rapid development in terms of consumers using your cell phone to pay for things. And that's obviously a combination of Apple Pay transactions. It could be PayPal transactions from your phone. It could be M-Pesa transactions. So this is really embracing the entire sort of mobile ecosystem. It's not only mobile point of sales. But all in all, we think that 2015 is shaping up to be a pretty monumental year for mobile payments. And there are a couple of important reasons, very, very fundamental and important reasons for that. So let me share some of those thoughts. First of all, the US, something very drastic has happened in the US. As some of you might know, the US in general is still using fairly Stone Age technology in terms of payments. They still have not implemented or mandated the chip card that we're fairly used to in Europe, but they're still using the magstripe card. It's like using a cassette player instead of Spotify, more or less. But now there's been a mandate. So the US is actually changing their entire infrastructure, their card payments infrastructure. So over the next 12 months, over 1.2 billion credit and debit cards will be changed in the US from the traditional, their historic solution, magstripe, into what we call EMV or chip. The biggest benefit of this is the impact it will have on fraud. What's really interesting is the fact that the US is not imposing the European standard, which is chip and PIN. In the US, they will still remain very true to signature. So you can use your chip card, and eventually you sign like you did with the magstripe. So that's a bit of a difference. And I think the reason for this is really that I think studies have shown that the holy grail of payments, especially card payments, is not the PIN. It's actually the chip that is the core. And this creates a lot of opportunities. So the American dream. Well, obviously, given that they are now going into a solution that's been present in Europe for quite some time, players like ourselves are obviously looking at what's going on in the US. You know, with 1.2 billion cards being changed, 13 million point of sales locations in the US will also need to change their infrastructure. And the average cost of changing that infrastructure, the terminal that you pay to, is around $500. If you compare it to what we do, and at the cost where we actually can deliver the same kind of infrastructure plus information to the merchant, you know, it's a fraction of that cost. And we have had the technology for years. You know, the first device that I showed you in the first sort of video, that was a very simple chip card reader that you plugged into your phone. Effectively, that's what's being launched in the US today, 4 years later. So obviously, we're pretty excited about what's going on over there. However, given that many of our competitors in the US will need to change their infrastructure as well in order to be able to process payments going forward, obviously this creates a very interesting opportunity for them to actually move into the European markets as well. So I think what we will see, especially in the mobile payment space over the next couple of months, is really US players coming to Europe and European players going over to try their luck in the US. I think also during the next year, there is a fairly big challenge, not only from payments, but from transactions overall. I mean, the incumbents, banks, and others, they are being challenged by a lot of innovators, I would say. It's everything from card payment companies like iZettle to foreign exchange services, TransferWise, it could be Funding Circle. I mean, banks and financial institutions, they will be challenged from everywhere. And I mean, it's not like we haven't had the services for quite some time, but what we can bring to the market and where they can't really compete, or at least have a very tough time in keeping up, is really how to create the service that is, first of all, very, very, very transparent. They're not really used to that, at least not in many markets. The second is, how do you combine a nice, transparent offering with a good packaging? So they've been fairly used to playing in this field by themselves, but now they're being challenged by a lot of innovative companies around the world, and especially in Europe. And I think the consequence of this is that some of the financial institutions, they will have to do something, but innovations isn't really the core of what they do. So I think you will see a couple of incumbents looking to acquire smaller and more nimble players to bring innovations into their DNA. You have a new generation of wallet wars coming. You have seen a lot of different mobile wallets trying to fight for their share of wallet over the last couple of years. Everything from PayPal to local bank solutions, etc. But overall, consumers are pretty fed up with the number of applications that they need to have in order to pay at the different locations. You are pretty fed up to have one Starbucks app to pay at Starbucks, one H&M app to pay at H&M, etc., etc. We're looking for one solution that fits our need. And quite frankly, the most interesting play that we have seen in this industry for quite some time, I still think, is Apple Pay. And the fact that you're, again, leveraging the installed base of cards, you have your phone, and you can pay more or less anywhere. But things are never as easy as they seem. What's happened now is actually the same thing that happened to Google Wallet and to PayPal back in the days. Many large merchants are really scared of that Apple will get hold of too much data. So they're shutting Apple out from the major retail stores in order to kind of cut them away from the data flow. So I think what's going to happen in the next couple of months is a situation where we're looking for one solution, but much more, where merchants are much more in control over data. And whether Apple is that winner and whether they can make it remains to be seen. But it's going to be a big challenge for them. Last but not least, I mean, going forward, let's just conclude that payments per se, sort of the transaction, is pretty much commoditized. So what the industry will be about in the next couple of months is really innovation, especially in the SME segment, where all the money is actually made. I mean, the bigger guys, they produce a lot of volume, but no one really makes any money. So the SME segment is extremely crucial to understand and to have a very good strategy for. And these guys are becoming pretty used to that innovation is going fast, that they get value-added services on top of the actual transaction. So what they will be looking for is innovations. How can they effectively communicate with their customers? If I come in to a Helsinki cafe in the morning and they want me back, is there any way for them to communicate with me? Those are services that they will be looking for. Is there an easy way for me as a cafe to have an accounting service that's tightly linked to my payment solution so that I don't have to spend too much time on accounting by the end of the day? So you see a lot of innovations in this space, and I think this will eventually have an effect on larger merchants as well. So this kind of summarizes our view on the future, sort of the near future of payments. And just last but not least, we have two Christmas announcements. One is that Christmas is coming early this year in Finland, apparently. And for all Finnish merchants that sign up with iZettle before November 26th, they get a free chip and PIN. But I think more importantly, and please spread the word, guys, but more importantly, look around for Santa within the Slush perimeter. He's walking around with his elves. Effectively, what they do is that they're collecting money for charities. 3 different charities are going around collecting payments with the help of iZettle. They have very ambitious targets, so help them reach that target. This is something that we have seen in the Swedish market as well. NGOs, magazines for homeless people, more and more people and organizations are using the infrastructure that we can provide in order for them to kind of boost their revenues. And if you look behind you, you can see Santa. He's extremely keen that you walk by and say hi, and he'll gladly accept any type of credit or debit card that you carry. Thank you very much.